I think my carrying voice good. Hello. Hello, Chichi.
Hello,
Hello, Chichi. Welcome.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
You can hear me now. Okay, good. I think we are. Are you ready for us?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. You are looking sideways. I think you should maybe put your
Okay.
camera in front. Yes. You are still looking side. Look straight. Okay. Okay.
Is it better?
Yes. So you turn left or right. I don't know. We'll get it right. Okay. Okay. It's better. It's better than before. Then move back a little so that you are not a little beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. We are good to go then. You can hear me clear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Beautiful. Okay. We are about to go 1, 2, 3. Ready? Let's go. Okay. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Feminist Voices, a global conversation, a podcast series of women major group during the High Level Political Forum 2023. We women major group, we are looking at various issues and we have over 7 advocacy messages, but we just hinge them on 7 that we are presenting at the High Level Political Forum. We are advocating for these 7 messages for the government, private sector to look into them and be able to come up with solutions that will help accelerate the recovery from COVID and full implementation of the SDGs. Okay, and one of such messages that Women Major Group had in this year High Level Political Forum 2023 is Advanced Feminist Civil Society Access, Leadership and Decision Making. I know when we are talking about leadership, we are talking about civil society, talking about leadership and decision making. There is no way you can talk about women without including women. And most times we have found out that the leadership question is something that actually helps in calculating the gender parity. Okay, the gender equality gap report that was released by World Economic Forum 2020, the 2023 gender gap report is saying that we still have about 100 years to be able to achieve gender equality. That's a way long journey, and we want this gender equality like right now. Okay, so these are some of the issues that is on the front burner, but well, we would be talking about the issue of how can feminist civil society access leadership and decision making ensure that the SDGs is fully implemented, that women and girls everywhere in their diversity are enjoying equal rights, equal opportunities, so that the SDG we already have, we just have 7 years to be able to achieve Agenda 2030. How feasible it is, how realistic it is. Well, we have somebody with us here today, and my guest today is no other person than Margaret Chichi Nkire. Am I getting it right? Nkire. Okay, so Margaret Chichi Nkire, she is the Executive Director of Leadership Empowerment Development Innovation Initiative Africa, Lead in Africa. Okay, and she's based in Lagos, Nigeria. Chichi, you are welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So, but we are talking about the issues around leadership, around civil society access, feminist civil society for that matter, access and decision making. And when we are looking at all this, and we are talking about power structure, power play, these are some of the places where women need to actually hinge themselves to be able to get access to decision making, get the power to be able to change some things. Okay. An independent and fully funded civil society is a prerequisite for the development of policies that will enable women live in dignity and quality. What are the hindrances feminist civil society are facing with regards to funding?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective at this high-level political forum, Women's Major Group Session on Feminist Civil Society Access, Leadership and Decision Making. Yes, like you rightly said, an independent and fully funded civil society truly is the bedrock for developing policies that promote dignity and quality of life for women. Now, in general, the importance of civil society organizations cannot be overemphasized because they are very crucial to attaining positive development outcomes within the society, which other organizations cannot achieve because they don't have the time to do advocacies, monitoring, and humanitarian work. Rather, they are interested in making profit for their own sustainability. Now, civil society organizations monitor government policies and actions and hold government accountable. They engage in advocacy and offer alternative policies for government. Now, the private sector and other institutions advocating for human rights for the needs and priority of their constituencies, especially the marginalized and vulnerable groups, of which women are top priority groups. Feminist civil society organizations amplify women's voices and they advocate for their rights and interests, contributing to mediating, resolving conflict, and also contributes to social innovation. And they deliver services, especially to the poor and the underserved. Over the years, we've seen that women have struggled for equality and against oppression for centuries. And although some battles definitely have been partly won, such as the right to advocate, the right to vote and equal access to education to some extent. Now, women are still disproportionately affected by all forms of violence and by discrimination in every aspect of life, which now necessitates feminist-owned organizations to amplify their voices and as they advocate and map out strategies for engagement at global, regional, and local levels. But there is still the burden of inadequate resources for institutional support to effectively carry out their programs and projects. So having financial autonomy will enable feminist civil society organizations to act independently and effectively to pursue their feminist agenda. But how? How can they actually have this financial autonomy? Which brings us to the issues that feminist civil societies are facing today, access to funding. Now, one of the issues is a lack of awareness and understanding of the importance of feminist issues within the funding institution, which is a very, very huge challenge. Because also, if you look at the national and political context and the organizational sector in terms of governance and influence, that is what can be done and how. For example, within the organizations, the ability for them to translate ideas into feminist issues, like formal gender equality structures and policies can be difficult if that organization has limited authority to do that due to the political environment. And like we all know, we understand the political terrain. We have the issues of patriarchy, the issues of power structure, women not being able to be in top leadership decision-making position. So all these things also affect the access to funding when it comes to organizational setup, funding organization. Another issue is the gender biases and the discriminatory practices in funding access for feminist organizations. We also have the issue of insufficient targeted resources and earmarked funding. Earmarked funding for feminist civil society organizations by government and donors and other institutions that can provide this funding. If there can be that intentionality towards targeting feminist civil society organization for them to have that institutional capacity, then we will go a long way to overcoming some of these challenges. Another challenge there is the overemphasis on short-term results and reluctance to invest in long-term social change. Now, it is important for me to state that work on gender equality does not usually happen rapidly, and it may appear slow, with concrete results and achievements not being fully realized for a number of years. I mean, when we talk about targeted advocacy projects that we carry out, it can take time to bring that desired change. My own organization, Leading Africa, I'm involved in advocacies. I know how much effort we put in when we go to government to advocate, and then you have times when they have to reschedule. Sometimes you've already planned yourself, and then you get a message that, oh, the permanent secretary is not available. We can understand all these things. And so it requires a lot of funding capacity at our own end for us to continuously push our advocacy efforts. And this is the reason why access to funding should be made easy for female-owned organizations. And we also have the issue of administrative burdens and complex funding application procedures that disproportionately affect smaller organizations. Because in reality, some funders, they are comfortable, yes, dealing with the bigger organizations because they believe they have the capacity and can be trusted, having worked with them in the past. And so smaller organizations are either left to become sub-grantees, and this can continue like that for a long while for this small organization. If more funding space is not being opened up for smaller organizations to have access to. So there is need for us to actually look at this integral issue when it comes to funding access for civil society feminist organizations.
Okay, thank you very much, Chichi. Okay, you have been able to itemize some of the challenges, and you even went further to to profile suggested some solutions on how to overcome some of these challenges. Okay, who should be accountable for the actions that will facilitate the engagement of civil society organizations, feminist and social movements to have access to UN negotiation process? UN negotiation process, because there's this outcry that some of these civil society organizations, feminists and social movement, do not have access to UN negotiation process. So who should be accountable for the action that will facilitate the engagement of civil society, feminists, and also social movement to have access to UN negotiation processes?
Yeah, I think it's important that the United Nations itself and other international bodies should recognize the fact that there is the need for a shared responsibility among stakeholders. I mean, this is the 17 SDG goals talks about partnership for development. So it is high time this is taken more seriously by global decision and policymakers at the level of the United Nations, at the African Union level. So all stakeholders at this level are definitely accountable to ensure that feminist civil society organizations are well and better integrated into the decision processes that is going to help to facilitate their engagement. And also the need for the United Nations to maintain accountability and its commitment to creating an inclusive and participatory movement. That is very key, because it's one thing for there to be policies, but it's another thing for it to be effectively implemented. So that there needs to be that commitment for accountability to the structures that's been put in place for engagement of civil society organizations, including feminist-owned civil society organizations. And then governments of countries needs to effectively play the role of creating enabling policies and frameworks for civil society and feminist engagement in their work in achieving the sustainable development, most especially when it comes to reporting progress, especially the VNR reviews at the high-level political forum, because, of course, that is what we are discussing. I mean, it's evident from reports that some civil society organizations, the issues of civil societies are not well implemented, not well reported, and that leaves a huge gap when it comes to full engagement and inclusion of civil society actors. Now, there needs to be active involvement and not partial involvement of civil society organization. Now, it is also the responsibility of funding institutions to prioritize feminist organizations and provide accessible funding mechanisms for them to be able to engage in these processes at the United Nations level. Because sometimes, even when we get to be invited to join in these reviews and processes at the UN level, funding becomes a challenge. And so feminist organizations, they are saddled with that burden of sourcing for funding to enable them to engage, because they want to be heard. We want our voices to be properly heard. So we want to be well included in decision making. So it is important.
Yeah. Okay. You have been able to outline some of the the actions and those that should be held accountable to facilitate the engagement of civil society, feminist and social movement to have access to UN negotiation processes. Okay. We know we can't all exhaust all the opportunities, the outlets to be able to recommend and make suggestions. But however, more women need to be part of leadership and decision making. What policies will facilitate women involvement in big corporation leadership and decision making? Because women need to be part of leadership and decision making. So what are the policies that will facilitate women's involvement in big corporation leadership and decision making?
Okay, I believe that for women to be part of better leadership and decision making, some steps need to be taken, especially when it comes to big corporations and the private sector. For instance, women are saddled with the responsibility of parenthood. So we find out that sometimes you find pregnant women are not able to cross to a higher level position because they are seen as at that period of parenthood, they would not be able to take up such huge responsibility, while the men are given the leeway to go ahead. So this also kind of hampers women involvement. So governments can play an important role in helping women maintain paid work and stay in full-time employment following parenthood, because the reproductive requirements such as pregnancy and childbirth has been seen to affect women's employment status and also their job determinants. So mandating and enforcing access to paid parental leave is an important first step. Providing mothers with guaranteed access to paid maternity and parental leave can also promote their job and continuity and help female labor force to be able to attain that level of leadership position in high corporations. And also having the family-friendly workplace practices can also help parents combine work and care commitments more effectively. Now, reports have shown that the COVID-19 pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic affected people's social and economic well-being worldwide, of which women are at the center. However, when all these policies are put in place, especially at workplace, it will help women to climb higher in higher positions of leadership, in particular the private sectors. So they have to really incorporate the principle of corporate governance, whereby the issues of diversity, inclusion and diversity is highly prioritized. This will help them to make position. Also, when it comes to government agencies, we need more women in politics. We need more women to be included in decision making. So it is very important that governments look at this and ensure that women are given a higher place at such levels for them to be able to thrive equally with men.
Okay, thank you very much. When you mentioned that during the COVID, I just quite remember an article I read, and it says that during the COVID, we were aware that women were at the forefront of responding as first responders and what have you. More than where the statistics was high, the number of caregivers that were women. But when a research was done, they found out that women are not in the healthcare sector. Women are not at the helms of affairs. Women are not in leadership position, and so you begin to wonder. The bulk of the people that were first responders were women. So what happened? Where is it? What is the missing link? Why are they not at the helms of affairs? Well, thank you very much for some of those suggestions and the policies you have asked that big corporations should incorporate to ensure that women are involved in their leadership and decision making, are the cadre of leadership and decision making. Okay, so now we have spoken, so we are talking generally. So I want to come back to you specifically. Can you tell us more about your work and what you do in Lead in Africa?
Okay, at Lead in Africa, we basically advocate for the rights of the vulnerable population. And the vulnerable groups include women, children, youths, the aged, and persons with disability. So we are very much involved at the grassroots level, empowering women to ensure that they raise their voices. They are being given that opportunity to speak out and, most importantly, know their rights as women. And we help to engage in policy advocacy with the government to ensure that women's rights are being looked at. When it comes to budget processes, we have been engaged with the Lagos State government budget process of the Ministry of Economic and Budget Planning, where civil society organizations come together. They are being invited to ensure that they bring the